Welcome, everybody. Just a heads up that we are recording this presentation. We'd love it to be interactive, so please feel free to use the chat and ask questions as they come. A lot of this presentation will be kind of fireside chat-esque. So if you want to ask questions as they come up, we'll leave time for Q&A at the end. We'll also have 2 polls that we're going to be sending out, so please participate. We'd love to have this be as interactive as possible for you all. So yeah, welcome to our webinar on Inside the Frontier Firm. I'm Hillary Batchelder. I'm Transparity's Microsoft Alliance Director, and just sharing a warm welcome with you all. So this one's really close to all of our hearts at Transparity. We're thrilled to have Simon Harrow from Tilt, Graham Hosking from Microsoft joining us, along with our Chief AI Officer, Jody Ashwood. And this webinar is really all about bringing the Frontier Firm to life. There's a lot of information and wordsmithing out there about what Frontier is, and we wanted to get really practical and bring real-world examples about what that actually means for real firms like yourselves. But first, just a little bit about us at Transparity. We're 100% focused on helping customers activate their business solutions, leveraging the Microsoft tech stack. We pride ourselves in being collaborative, being built on trust, and really working to customize solutions that our clients need to help them accelerate and grow. So as you can see, we have all the Microsoft solution designations, which really means that behind all of this, we have a ton of technical breadth and technical depth that really helps bring our expertise across the Microsoft stack. And also for our clients, that means that we can work with them to unlock all of the different funding pots behind that, so it can be a competitive advantage for you all. But yeah, with that, I'm really excited to hand over to Graham Hosking from Microsoft, and he'll lead us through the latest and greatest on Frontier transformation.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Hillary. Well, it's great to see so many people coming to a lunchtime chat as well. But as Hillary just said, what is the Frontier Firm? You've probably heard this being coined around, especially talking about AI within different enterprises. And that's what today is about. We're exploring the journey about how organizations basically move from experimenting with AI. So I still see a lot of organizations do that, and achieving more of the transformation when it comes to enterprise scale AI. So this is the shift that we're referring to, this frontier transformation. Now, when we're talking about the next evolution of AI transformation, we're not just talking about like a chatbot and retrieving information. We're trying to unlock the creativity and the innovation and the growth that every organization needs to adhere to. And it's really built on the idea that AI needs to do more for humanity. It's not just a nice, shiny tool, like it's here today, and big enterprises are already using this in production. And it's really the kind of through line for today is understanding from Tilt and Transparity about like what are the themes and use cases and scenarios that we're seeing across that landscape today that you can learn from as well. So from a Microsoft point of view, which is the field that I sit in, I look after M365 Copilot and building agents within Copilot Studio, for example. But it's speaking to those types of customers to understand what are the things that are pain points for them today, and how we can use technology to either make life a lot easier for them, how to drive things like sales, or how do we do things more in engineering. I speak to a lot of finance teams as well. What can finance do with IT to improve their bottom line? And other things around like HR and security operations. There's AI capabilities that map to all of these different departments that's applicable to every organization that we have to work with. And today, would you believe that over 90% of the Fortune 500 companies actually use Microsoft Copilot? So again, it's not an emerging technology anymore. Copilot has now been around for over 3 years, I think about 3.5 years. And we've learned a lot as Microsoft as well, being customer zero. So as we're adopting our own technologies and we're perfecting that, we're also giving that to our customers as well. Now, we don't want to bore you with like a ton of slides for today, but just a couple, just to kind of frame what the industry is actually seeing. So we see the AI adoption really accelerating extremely rapidly. And I've got some scenarios of that I'll talk to later on when we're in the fireside chat. But conversations I would have had like 2 months ago are very, very different now to the conversations I have today. Technology is moving extremely fast, faster than we've ever seen before. So if we think about like the number of agents that are being created. As they expand, the complexity of those agents also increases as well. And that's due to things like the data that they access, the governance, the security, and the operations of all of these agents, whether they're built by Microsoft or by third parties. We need that holistic view about what all these agents are there to do, what impact they're having for the business, and whether they're actually providing real world value to the business as well. And according to Deloitte, they said that 84% of companies really haven't redesigned jobs around this yet, right? And thinking about the AI capabilities we have today, in the next number of months, that's going to shift and change as well. So it's something to think about. And what has driven us to building this webinar today to show you like that thought process about what you might need to do, but also what the futures might bring as well. Now, when we're kind of shifting gears slightly, I talked about all of these different agents. It's really around kind of bending the curve. And that's not just around like thinking up new problems or new pain points and seeing whether AI can solve that kind of problem for you, but really understanding the risks and issues and workflows you have today to see what might be applicable to AI and business transformation as well, and automation. So it's kind of reinventing the types of things you do today, but do it in a slightly different way. And that's where the frontier transformation really is visible across all different industries and geographies, like embedding AI into real world operations and not just pilots. That might be somewhere where you start and you're understanding where it might be applicable for AI and automation to interject with that. But it's not just around technology as well. And I still see a lot of asks from customers where they're going, well, what can we use AI for? You should really be thinking about, well, what are the types of things you do as a business and an organization today that you believe AI could potentially do? Technology should be last in the conversation. It should be business first, the operations that you do, and then seeing whether technology can help you with that. And we see big global brands with high pressure environments like the sports and entertainment areas where AI is being used to have real world outcomes, providing speed, and really what matters most to this types of business as well. So the key takeaway, I guess, is frontier firms are providing the AI intelligence and the trust together. So AI becomes a more durable operated capability and not just a side experiment. All of this is wrapped around the data and knowledge and systems and connectivity that you've got access to today. How do we make life a lot easier using AI to connect into the systems that we already have? So Microsoft has a set of solutions called Microsoft IQ. And that's where you can pull in intelligence around your mailbox or the files and the content you've got access to today. Think about all of the different databases and systems, like you may have SAP or ServiceNow that I was talking to a customer about this morning, like all of these third-party systems as well that we can bring in to AI and agents to bring in that intelligence into one central unified view of what the business is doing to get work done. The core processes, the data, the applications, the situational knowledge, right? Some of these big organizations have been around for decades. How do we harness the information that they already have? So we can do that with Microsoft IQ. And lastly, it's being able with these frontier firms to scale at confidence, especially with the Microsoft stack. Regardless of what technology you're using in that stack, we have the security and the compliance and the governance that's baked into those applications. So as and when you're building an AI agent using Agent Builder, for example, really lightweight agents that you can create as retrieval agents that are personal to you. All of that governance and that observability is built into those applications. If you're building more pro-code agents over in Foundry, for example, you've got the same security and grounding of those types of agents as well. And that's the whole reason why we brought in things like Agent 365, which is this central control plane for both first and third party agents, and actually gets released tomorrow, in fact, where any type of agent can be registered in your estate. So you have full observability about not who's just using those types of agents, but also what are those agents doing? How did they get to that conclusion, that outcome that they decided? What data they're using? Is it being used in the right way? Is it posing a certain risk? So it's very, very hard, or has been very, very hard to do for all of these different agents that are being created by Microsoft and third parties, but now you have a central area in order to do that. So I'm just going to stop the slides there for a second, and let's head over to Jodie and get her perspective on things.
Thank you, Graham. So thanks again for all of you who have joined us today. We really appreciate it over your lunch break on a lovely sunny day. I've just got 4 slides to kind of set the scene before I'm going to introduce our panelists for kind of today's fireside chat. And just a reminder that we will be taking kind of questions, and we really want this to be collaborative. So please do start thinking about them and posting them in the chat. And also I noticed that kind of 60% of you from the poll are actually already deploying AI across your organization. So it'd also be great to hear from you on, those use cases that you've got started with, and actually some of those lessons that you've learned along the way as well. So yeah, please do kind of share your journey in the chat for everyone as well. So I just wanted to kind of set the scene in terms of taking a step back, what we're seeing across all of the different organizations that we're working with across different industries within the UK, and hopefully that will provide a little bit of structure for us getting into the discussion. And I think it's clear that you're all experiencing this already, but that AI kind of really has been unavoidable over the last 3 years, and we're seeing that momentum is definitely continuing. It's not going anywhere. But like Graham just mentioned, we're seeing that shift from experimenting, that kind of those ideas, that curiosity, and actually being able to move into really operationalizing AI at scale and taking advantage of that kind of transformational piece is where some organizations are still getting stuck. So we can see that there's this kind of disconnect between moving from those ideas and it being kind of this, board level discussion into actually how are you going to apply this to your organization to see kind of sustainable business value. So to make sure we're really understanding the realistic journey that our clients are going on, and to make sure we're kind of serving our customers in the best possible way, we really wanted to understand that perspective. So we partnered with YouGov to run a survey, and this was targeting UK IT leaders and decision makers. You can see we've had around 500 responses from a variety of different industries and organizational sizes. And whilst I think the response and the results haven't been a surprise, I think it's still quite insightful in terms of what it's showing, and hopefully it will resonate with kind of what you've seen on your journeys as well. So we're seeing that there is clear momentum. AI is being prioritized at an exec board level, and we're seeing that it's being noted now as a formal line item on IT budgets, and that was up to around a total of 30%. Yet there is still this, these pain points around moving into execution. So 24% of those respondents were still in pilot phase. They hadn't successfully been able to operationalize any use cases. And those that had were still actually only realizing that value in one department or in one kind of business process. So they weren't realizing that value at scale. And when we looked at what are those common pain points, what are the common challenges, where are organizations kind of falling down with some of this stuff, we saw that there were 3 main challenges present, and this is regardless of the industry, your budget, or the chosen platform. And that was around AI still being treated as something that's quite siloed. So it's not actually being connected to the wider business strategy. It's not being used as kind of, just another tool in that toolkit, an enabler for what you're trying to achieve as an organization. We've seen that there is a growing uncertainty around where and also how AI is being used. And there's quite a lot of concern around, the fact that shadow AI is becoming the new shadow IT, and people are pressing pause and limiting that innovation because they're fearful of how to actually deal with this. And then finally, again, that lack of velocity from pilot to deployment. And the reasons why we think this is happening is because AI is evolving so incredibly quickly, and there is that rapid pace of change. We see that organizations are feeling a little overwhelmed with actually, there's so many tools, there's so many options. Do we buy off the shelf? Do we build? And they're kind of, feeling overwhelmed, and again, just pressing pause to evaluate. And finally, just that not knowing where to get started. So having so many ideas, but not able to translate that into a roadmap, not able to kind of translate that into a business case in terms of what is going to provide sustainable value so that we can continue with this investment. And I think it's no surprise, the results showed that what does good look like? What is really making a difference for organizations who are seeing success? And I think really it's structure, and it's having that holistic plan across not only technology, but really thinking about this from an organizational change perspective. So really thinking about this from a people and process perspective. And we're going to dive into this shortly. I believe this is my last slide. So we'll dive into this shortly, but I just wanted to cover off kind of some of those characteristics or components that organizations were saying are what's having an impact on them being successful. So first of all, it's really starting with that people lens, really thinking about this from an adoption and change management perspective, and actually bringing your workforce on the journey with you. So I think, there's still a long way to go for some organizations in terms of just digital literacy. So then having to apply that AI literacy view on top, and actually empowering their workforce to think about AI and the capability, the tools that can aid them in their work, rather than it kind of, replacing that. And we really see that adoption and change management and upskilling is something that has to be reinforced over time. It's not something that's kind of one and done. If you just run a webinar to upskill your staff and away you go, it's typically we see that there is a bit more of a journey and taking a phased approach, so that folk aren't overwhelmed, and just starting with the basics. We've seen that starting with employee productivity tools has been a great way to get people involved before then moving on to kind of some of those more complex topics around agentic AI. Next is that executive sponsorship piece, and this, we really see this needs to be C-level, executive board level, and treating this as organizational transformation. So it does require prioritization, it requires strategic investment, and we believe that, executive sponsorship is what really ensures that AI will be aligned with your organizational strategy. It will be supported by the right governance, and actually it will be adopted by your wider workforce. AI policy, a lot of organizations we speak to, when they're looking at governance at the moment, is really from that soft messaging and that policy perspective. It does obviously need to be underpinned by the security and governance policies to be enforced. But we're seeing that actually just starting with that AI policy, giving people guardrails from what can they do, what don't you want them doing as an organization, just helps to build that confidence and helps to build that trust so that people feel comfortable to get started. And again, this needs to be supported by that kind of structured roadmap to ensure that this is going to help you achieve those organizational goals, rather than just being those, pockets of success scattered across the organization that are going to stay siloed, and they're not really going to add that kind of, sustainable value and capability. And last but not least, being underpinned by those kind of technology foundations that can scale. AI needs to be underpinned by security, governance, and good quality data, right? So we're getting to this a little bit more detail too. And finally, I think we do see a lot of organizations thinking about AI from a responsible and ethical perspective as an afterthought. And actually, it's really, really hard to do that retrospectively. It does need to be kind of inclusive by design. There are loads of tools available now in terms of things like content safety and, tooling around explainability to make sure that you can do this, at the forefront. So these are just some of the characteristics that we see as being important to think about across that holistic lens. And we'll share some of these pillars to kind of structure the chat around. But I do really want to make sure we've got plenty of time for discussion, plenty of time to answer your questions. So to bring this to life, I'm going to bring Simon and Graham back into the conversation. Appreciate you've all just heard from Graham, so I'm just going to give Simon a couple of minutes just to introduce himself, his background, and the kind of journey that he's been on with Tilt Insurance, and then we'll get into a bit of a discussion and start to look into the chat at some of your questions too. Simon?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jodie. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. So my name's Simon Harrow. I'm one of the co-founders and COO of Tilt Insurance, and we are in the incredibly privileged position where we are building a kind of startup inside a large corporate business, and therefore have none of the kind of legacy challenges that so many of you I know are wrestling with as we kind of step into this new and very exciting world. My background very quickly, I've built and sold 3 businesses. Across insurance, software and retail. The team behind our last insurance business that we exited have got together again to build Tilt. And really because we felt that there was such an opportunity in the market to leverage a very fast moving and ultimately new technology landscape to solve an industry that has really built itself around inertia. And I think AI sits at the very heart of that. I'm already getting very sick and tired of just talking about being a kind of AI organization. But I think we are probably living and breathing that experience more than most, purely because, as I said, we kind of started with a blank sheet of paper. So really quickly, the way that we think about this to kind of help frame this fireside chat is we think about 3 things. We think about how we use AI to do more, do better, and do new. And we think about that across individuals, teams, and organizations. And if you think about that on a kind of matrix, my perception is, having spent a lot of time, like I'm sure a lot of you, talking to people in the market over the last 12, 18 months in particular, is so many boards are focused on the kind of do new at an organizational level, right? They are trying to build big, complex, quite often quite shiny, quite PRable kind of AI capability in order to say that they've got a big shiny AI deployment. And actually what we found through our lived experiences is, although that is important, and actually as the AI world becomes more agentic, that is going to have a really important role to play. There is so much value on the table that you can get to if you kind of move right to left, all the way back down into just helping the people inside your organization improve the quality and quantity of the work that they are doing, helping teams do more and do things that they couldn't do before you get to the big shiny stuff. And really that insight has been compounded and I guess strengthened over the last 12 months in particular, a little bit to what Graham mentioned, which is just the speed that this is moving. So we worked with Microsoft to build one of those bottom right quadrant AI deployments. It was a genuinely world-class customer-facing AI solution. It cost a significant amount of money. It didn't, it took a little bit of time to build. We got access to it in around May last year. Transparency were absolutely pivotal in helping us build that. And by November, it had been completely surpassed by a low-code, no-code solution in Copilot Studio. And so we started to think really differently about AI in how do we start to create kind of portability, accepting that the tooling that we're going to be deploying is not going to be the tooling that we're going to be using in, 2 years, 1 year, potentially 6 months. So that again also shifts that model more from bottom right to top left, because if you accept that what you're kind of building today arguably could be throwaway within that kind of 6 to 12 month framework, I think that puts a slightly different lens on how you think about AI. So yeah, that's our kind of framework that we work through. Everything from leveraging out of the box capability to things like Copilot Studio, but not just Copilot, Claude, Gemini, etc. Low-code solutions through things like Copilot Studio, but also leveraging the AI capability inside our kind of partner ecosystem. So figuring out what other access we have to in terms of tooling that we don't have to build ourselves. Whether that's through things like Figma or in our world Ernix, which is a kind of pricing tool, all the way through then to kind of those big custom builds through AI Foundry that I sort of touched on. So yeah, in a really quick 5 minutes, that's who we are. That's been a brief overview of our kind of journey, how we think about AI, and hopefully set up for some interesting conversations at this chat.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. And I can see there's a question in the chat window, so we will get to that. But yeah, please do, as we talk through, kind of submit more questions. I thought when we're thinking about how to structure today, we didn't just want to think about this from a technology perspective. So we thought actually thinking about this as an interconnected system, we wanted to look at this from not only, a people process, but also a technology perspective. So we found that thinking about it like in terms of this interconnected system, we've seen that organizations are then able to kind of understand the dependencies between these different drivers and manage them more deliberately, which has resulted in kind of a lack of that, not just having that isolated progress, but really thinking about it from a more of a holistic perspective. So I've got a few pre-canned questions whilst we wait for some of the audience participation in the chat. And I don't want to spend too long on the data and governance piece, but I think interestingly, when I speak to a lot of organizations, and actually I was with the university this week, and one of the things came up is from, I think, companies where there is that technical debt and they have been, buying off the shelf systems and they've got a lot of different tooling and they don't necessarily have their data in a single source of the truth. Many companies are currently embarking on that data strategy piece. So we hear our data's not ready. We don't feel like we can do AI without our data being in a good place, because ultimately, right, it's not magic, rubbish in, rubbish out. How have you seen other organizations approaching that in terms of, do you think that's a valid reason to wait? Do you think that some of this stuff can be done in parallel? Because I think I'm always saying you cannot wait for perfect in this space, because the capability gap's just going to keep growing. But how have you thought about, pushing forward that data strategy at the same time leveraging some of the value that AI can bring, Graham?
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of day-to-day conversations are just all around that. And if you know me from previous years, I used to specialize within the data governance pieces, so all around data security and purview and all of that. And my role was to go in and understand all of these different kind of data maps, as we used to call them. Like, what pockets of data do you have, and what are you trying to protect? What are your crown jewels? And just the conversation comes around again, when you're talking about AI and you're thinking about how much data those organizations has, how old it is, what's going to be relevant. Those types of conversations come up to say, look, I'm trying to use this AI, but it's giving me really old information. But I still don't think that is a reason why people should stop what their AI projects until they've done all their data, because that could be multiple years worth of projects, right? And especially when it comes down to identifying that data and labeling that data, which you can obviously do within the Microsoft stack, that can also take years, right? So it's not a quick win, but identifying like the key areas that you don't want AI to be in there, understanding kind of what internal policies you have or what AI charters that should be in place is definitely a good grounding to get started. All of the data stuff requires multiple stakeholders as well. So I don't know, Simon, like, you've been doing this for quite a while as well. Like, what have you seen around like that proliferation of data and mix of new and old data in combination with AI?
Yeah, so I completely agree with you, by the way. Like, this is the story as old as time, right? People have been trying to get their data into a good place for forever.
Exactly.
I think what's really interesting is if you let's just take quite an extreme view. It's like we had no data, right? We were a new organization. There was no data. And I think actually what's really interesting is there's so much applicable use of AI in functions that you might not think of when you stop thinking about data in that strictest sense, but perhaps think about documentation for AI ingestion. So what we put a lot of effort into is effectively creating documentations, not for humans, but for AI. So there's a really lovely analogy we use, which is, imagine that you've brought in like a really smart, like grad, like super ambitious, really knowledgeable, but lacks all of the context of your business, right? They're limited in the value that they can add. So what we've put a huge amount of effort into is how do we give that super smart, capable, young, bright thing context. So what we've created is a kind of massive library of markdown files that are portable, that are updated, that are kind of living documentation, that are completely agnostic, that we can drop into any tooling. And what that's meant is that we can go and put it into things like we've completely automated our marketing compliance sign-off processes, taking all of the kind of FCA and advertising standards guidelines. We use it to create real-time prototypes, to build like scenario planning. We use it for strategy documentation. We use it to keep, competitor review frameworks updated. None of that's like what I would call kind of traditional data, right? Like it's not like our customer data or sales data. It's documentation we've created, not because a human is ever going to actually sit and read it, intentionally designed not to be, but it supercharges the tooling that we put into those other functions. So yeah, my challenge would be, if you are getting a little bit overwhelmed by the amount of work you've got to do to get your data into a way that AI can be useful as a layer over the top of it, go and find some use cases that don't require that data and think about building really good grounding documentation and skill libraries to extract value in other ways.
I think you're right, Simon. Like whenever I have discussions with my particular customers, so I look after all of the software builders across Europe. So it's a large remit as well. But like they want to jump into the shiny stuff that you mentioned earlier on. Like they want to have it as a showcase into their business, saying, look what we've built. But then not realizing that there's more simple things, like you said, like what's the process that you're trying to follow? How do we write that down? Because it's not written down anywhere in a traditional organization, right? It's in people's heads. So it's a combination of that translation of human skills that we have to understand that business process or do part of that process. It's never to replace the human. The human's going to be there all the time, by the way. It's not going to come in and just do your job for you, but it may do all of the laborious and boring things for you. And whenever I talk to like a group of people, I always talk about the typing pool. I'm getting older now, so people sometimes don't know what the typing pool is, right? But what it is in big corporates, you used to have a room of people, and they all their sole job was to take handwritten notes and then put it into a typewriter, and then you've got your copy, right? That was the typing pool. But as soon as like word processing came out and computers, like we didn't need the typing pool. So like there's just a different type of situation, I think, with the use of these types of technologies to understand what you're trying to achieve to give you the outcome that you were expecting. And it all goes back to what you're saying, Simon, is like those processes need to be written down and explained and why you do certain things, just like you would with a new employee coming on board and telling them. So start simple is the kind of thing that we're trying to say, I guess.
Yeah, and I think also it depends on, what you're actually trying to move the needle on in terms of that business strategy, that strategic alignment piece, because some of this can be done in parallel, but you've got to know what are you actually trying to achieve, right? And I think before we jump into some of these audience questions, maybe it'd just be good for you guys to share a couple of tangible, real examples of how AI has added value, or Graham, for your clients, how you've seen AI really adding value. Because I think what we hear a lot as well is we need to show some ROI, we're struggling to build out this business case. So how do you select those use cases, like prioritize those use cases to actually get started with? And Simon, I don't know if you had a process of doing that within the organization, or whether it was just pushed down for people to kind of crack on with a little bit more in terms of just leveraging AI as part of their day to day. Did you think about those two things differently?
Yeah, it was a combination of all, Jenny, actually, is the honest answer. So let me give you some real world examples. So to Graham's point, one of the things that we built to help like streamline the process was we built a product called Underwrite IQ that basically takes raw input, so it can be PDFs, Word documents, PowerPoints, emails, it can be whatever. It effectively goes, structures all the data, goes out and validates it using external data sources, runs it against an underwriting guide, and provides a report to an underwriter that basically says, this is what we think you should do with it, and it's in a perfect format ready to bind. That process used to take an underwriter around an hour to do manually. using AI for a solution we built in Foundry, we got it down to like 2.5 minutes, right? So no grounding really in our kind of core data, just a bit around our sort of process to Graham's example, right? We mapped that out end to end and went and built a solution. So real tangible, meant that we didn't have to hire more people as we kind of grew. The AI created efficiency in that team. So that would be a kind of custom build at like a team or an organizational level. Some really interesting ones around low code, no code, like company-wide agents. This was probably my favorite. So we took all of our Howden corporate policy guidelines, right? So expenses policies, health and benefits, data protection policies, GDPR, like all of it, right? How many documents. And the irony is that documentation is like perfectly structured for AI ingestion. It wasn't designed to be, but it absolutely is. It's got really clear headers and short bullet points. And I don't know about you guys, but I'll put my hands up. I've never sat and read through all of a company's, governance and policy documentation. That's just not something I want to do. So what we did was we, in about 20 minutes, we basically put all of those into a SharePoint folder. We built a little agent inside Copilot Studio called Rulebook. We deployed it via Teams, and basically anybody in the company can now go on Teams and they can ask Rulebook, like, can I expense this taxi? How do I go and book a holiday? I've just found out I'm pregnant, who do I need to tell? Like, they can go and interact with this very, very detailed but very dry information in a way that feels more human to them, right? And it was a 20-minute build and deploy, right, using a low-code, no-code solution. All the way then through to where I personally get the most excitement is people using AI tooling in their kind of personal workflows, right? And what we've started to do, which is quite interesting, is as I talked about the kind of grounding documentation for the company, this is who we are, this is how we think, this is how we perceive risk, this is our strategy, all that kind of stuff. What's really interesting is when you start getting down to people having their own kind of like personal brains inside their tooling, where it has their perception of, say, like risk or tone or style or whatever it might be, suddenly the quality of the output from those individuals, even if they're using it inside our kind of corporate level frameworks, become really, really valuable. So I'm a big proponent of kind of decentralizing AI tooling at that level, because I feel like, and I do disagree a little bit with what Graham said earlier, actually, which is, I love it when IT comes into the mix, bringing ideas as well. You're absolutely right. Business needs to define the problems and work our way down, and IT provide solutions. But if the business doesn't know what the technology is capable of doing, then actually they might miss an opportunity to completely rethink a process or an opportunity, right? So we work really hard actually to make sure that we're kind of sharing kind of AI capability broadly, because it constantly spins up new ideas. For example, we build all of our landing pages for our marketing campaigns using AI, right? They're AI generated, AI hosted, like we don't do anything manual with them. We were showing our finance team those, and they were like, oh, that's really interesting, because we currently are building reports out of Fabric and Power BI, but actually, like, sometimes that team doesn't deliver the work as fast as sometimes we need it. Could we use some of our tooling to build our own dashboards, right? So we talk about like individuals doing things they could never do before. All of a sudden, we've got finance people built off one version of the truth still, building their own data, like insight reporting, like as artifacts that they share within the business. That's really cool. You'd never get there if they didn't know that AI could do that.
Yeah, and I think you have a really strong stance now on like expectations when you're hiring in the market, right? Around, you want people to be AI comfortable, and it's, yeah, okay, they might not be there, but having that open-mindedness to leveraging AI tools at work.
If we got again, we're really small guys. Like, I just want to keep stressing that point. It's easy for us to talk like this because we're a small business with a green field. There's 30 of us now. If you came and joined our business and you weren't an aggressive user of AI, you would stick out like a sore thumb, because the volume and the quality and the capability that people deliver now within our business is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And it's not that you would look like a star if you used it, you would look like an absolute laggard if you didn't.
Yeah, and I think it's, even their organizations are much bigger, they've got a lot of work to do, I guess, there around adoption and change management and AI literacy. I think it's still important to know that this is going to disrupt, because organizations like yourself are going to be entering every market and industry, right, with that mindset. So Graham, I guess I know you are currently working with more kind of software, software developers and ISVs, but historically you've worked with a lot of professional services organizations, construction, where, potentially that culture looks slightly different. What have you seen in terms of organizations trying to build that new culture and that new mindset? Have you seen any kind of nice little tips and tricks that you would recommend to the audience around going on that journey when, for some people, AI still feels incredibly scary, right? What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I've got lots of thoughts on that, to be honest with you. Just going back to what Simon's saying, being a small organization but moving fast and doing a lot more than any small organization could do in the past, I think is awesome, right? Just look at like Anthropic and OpenAI. These companies haven't been around forever, right? They've only been around for a number of years. Look at Microsoft, right? We've been around for decades, like decades and decades. So some of those stories, I think, Jody, for the kind of bigger customers, ones that I bring up all the time, regardless of like how big the customer I'm talking to is things like Barclays, right? So Barclays, again, has been around for many, many years. And they publicized a story with Microsoft around their colleague AI agent. And that was more around how could they help internal employees, just like Simon was talking about, right? How do you find information that's there somewhere? But instead of having like one agent that just gave like HR specific information, they wanted it tightly integrated into all of their key partners and connectors they had. So they're using things like SAP and ServiceNow and Salesforce from a sales perspective, right? So that one colleague AI agent is an orchestrator that brings in all of their applications that they use behind the scenes, but also Barclays have their own applications, right?
Yeah.
So I've been able to kind of identify those kind of unique areas and what the business value is going to be. It's very, very easy then to have some calculations around the return on investment of those types of things. So Microsoft also was working with them on that project, and that's why we have things like the employee self-service agent. So it's an agent that's built by Microsoft, but integrates it both into Microsoft tooling and third-party tooling.
Yeah.
So we'll work with you in order to create that colleague AI agent that Barclays has done. They've done other things as well, right? So being able to find information is far easier now with agents, but we also have built-in capabilities. And I think that's a good place to start. Don't go away and build things that are custom to you unnecessarily. Still see lots of people do that. But investigate about what is available first. Regardless of the vendor or the technology for a moment, like what's happening in the industry? What are people doing? Take some of these stories like Barclays and many, many more, and from Tilt, like what are the aspects that we can pick up and reuse from their learning as well? Or what agents are already pre-built that we could pick up and provide initial value, and then we can customize on that later. Lots of different options to choose from.
I think like you've got the agent store with lots of pre-built agents, from like a marketplace perspective. You're also seeing so many customers talking more publicly around, what they're doing now. So the inspiration's definitely all out there. We also do see that kind of showing, not telling approach works really nicely in terms of that, champion communities internally, being able to just showcase, what has worked well within your own organization to get people thinking differently. We have, AI communities internally just to support people on that kind of upskilling journey. And I think before we go across to the chat, I just wanted to finally end on governance, because I think, risk management is going to become more complex with agentic AI, and it is something that we hear from organizations on a daily basis. So at what point do you guys see that governance comes into the conversation, and how have you actually thought about that practically? Because I think, like I said earlier, the soft messaging's there, the policy's there. Simon, did you take a stance of you were building this alongside, or what? You're obviously in a highly regulatory industry, right? So how did you think about governance and risk?
Yeah, it was day one consideration. So yeah, look, we operate in a regulated environment. In fact, as part of the benefit of being part of Howden and but operating kind of over here is that we've had an opportunity to kind of feed in directly to the FCA's views on AI. I think at a very high level, my view is this. This is the first technology that evolves and changes without you doing anything, right? So just because a response behaves like this today doesn't mean it responds like it tomorrow, despite the fact you may have not changed anything in your kind of config. That comes with inherent risk. I think, therefore, we think about the cost and ability to build AI, providing you overcome all of the challenges that we talked about on this call, is actually relatively easy. The technology is readily available and highly capable. The problem is that building it and deploying it is day one. Maintaining and ensuring that it's still doing what it intended to do when you built it and launched it is actually quite labor and cost intensive. So we've factored all of that into the way that we think about this. In fact, we've worked with both Microsoft and Transparency to really think about how you build proper governance and testing frameworks for a world where that is true, so that we can monitor everything from kind of drift and making sure that the testing expectations are all right, and all of that stuff we've kind of fed in. However, our overriding line into the FCA has been this, which is the AI may not be perfect 100% of the time, and we have to accept that. The frameworks, whether it's consumer duty or operational resilience, they all remain valid. However, I think it's a much better outcome for customers. So, for example, we use the Quality AI Automation Agent inside Microsoft Dynamics. It's a turnkey solution off the shelf, like just in the conversation that's been had. Why would we build that ourselves? It exists as a pre-built solution. We've turned that on. Is it perfect? No, it's not, right? There is inaccuracies in the transcriptions. It sometimes gets some of the evaluation models a little bit wrong. However, it allows us to audit 100% of customer interactions. In my previous business, we had 150,000 customer contacts per month, and we audited around 3%, right? That means 97% of those interactions had no human oversight or visibility. Surely it's better to have 100% coverage, accepting that there is some inaccuracies in the model, knowing that you've got human involvement at various gates and stages, and you're constantly testing and refining the AI sitting over the top of it, than just auditing 3%. And that's going to take some, cultural shifts, not just for organizations, but for regulatory bodies as well, to get comfortable with. But I'm struggling to find a counter argument to that. The volume that you're going to be able to audit outweighs that maybe the slight levels of inaccuracy that might exist in each conversation.
Yeah, it does always kind of make me chuckle when we talk about organizations saying they need 100% accuracy, because I think you're never going to get that from us as humans. We're not perfect. We have off days. We definitely 100%. Miss things. But like you say, it's that mindset shift. So completely. Graham, anything to add, or should we jump into some of the questions in the chat?
Yeah, I think we should jump into the chat, actually. There's some really good questions being asked there. Everything that we've kind of talked about, the themes there around kind of regulatory view. So should we start from the top and then we can go down?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we've touched on this a little bit, but the first question was, what is your opinion on the deployment model and support? Because I think we hear a lot about citizen developers, COEs. How do you think about this? How are you seeing organizations approach this? Over to either of you, whoever jumps in first.
Yeah, I can jump in if you want. This is another common topic, but usually after the fact. Like organizations will jump in and start using AI, and they go, "Oh, we've built hundreds, and now it's cost us quite a lot." Like there's no center of excellence that's been set up yet. So Microsoft does provide like a starter kit that's aligned to the agent lifecycle and the governance aspects and that observability. I know we got a question later on about like monitoring for what the agent is doing. Like all of that should be part of your center of excellence. But that's not the answer to everything, right? That's going to give you the strategy, but you still have to go and set these guardrails and the compliance and the controls up as well. But it'll give you that kind of framework in order to achieve that. And that's where Microsoft rely on partners like you, because you'll have more of that coal face view of what you've seen with other customers and been able to implement that interpretation of that starter kit for the COE that will actually work for those individuals, right?
yeah, for those who haven't come across it, it's a Copilot Studio kit. It's yeah, it's great, and we've leveraged it because it's best practice guidance from Microsoft around that COE approach. And I think going back to Simon's point earlier around do more, do better, do new, that's also a great model in terms of that empowering a workforce around that employee productivity piece and using AI to make their day-to-day better, but also thinking about it like the low code agent piece from a departmental internal business process perspective, and then really where do you want to think about custom AI for IP, enterprise scale AI. I think we are going to see a blend of all three realistically, but it's having the right frameworks around that. We often get asked to come and look at governance for organizations who I think they're at the beginning of their journey, and then when we start switching things on, they see actually there's 1,000 agents already live across the organization.
Yep.
So ultimately this is happening, right? I think it's just getting comfortable with that framework and making sure you can kind of govern that and have the right policies in place. Simon, anything to add from your side?
I don't think so. I think just constantly reminds me why I love working in SMEs and not large corporates, because we don't have centres of excellence, we just do. So yeah.
And this is it. I think it's building it into the processes you already have, right? A lot of this stuff isn't new. So it's just taking advantage of the structures you've already got in place as well. The next question was, where does evidence suggest the real value of AI lies within the context of the 5 drivers? Does this suggest a sensible start point for the use of AI? Given the pace at which AI is developing, how do AI deployments become future-proof to avoid the requirements for evolutionary redundancy? And
Good
I
question.
guess, Simon, you touched on this a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I did. It's a really good question. I don't think enough companies are thinking about that. I think they're thinking that what they're building is just like it has for the last 20 years of technology, is going to be fit for purpose for 5 years or whatever it might be. So I think there's going to be some shocks. I mean, generally, I was absolutely blown away that we, as I said to you this sort of 20 minutes ago, we built this world-class AI deployment with transparency in Microsoft, US involvement. Like we had main board sponsorship from Microsoft behind this project, and literally by November it was technically redundant. I mean, that blows my mind. So I don't think this is to answer the first part of the question, sorry, I don't think this is necessarily the rollout route. I think actually it's about what's right for your business, and finding advocacy, I think, is a huge part of that. My one perhaps call out would be that advocacy can live in departments and individuals that you might not think of. So believe it or not, the single largest user of AI in our organisation is our head of compliance, and he's about to retire. But he has just embraced it because it's allowed him to do more, do better, and do new. So yeah, I don't think you just want to be like, okay, well, we're definitely going to put it into our engineering team because we're going to help them write code, and these guys will be really tech comfortable with it. Like, you could be surprised where that advocacy comes from. So yeah, I don't think this is necessarily the rollout. I think it does vary, and I would encourage you all to be thinking about the portability of what you're building rather than vendor lock-in, because we definitely have a view. And that's evolved. We were fully in Microsoft. We had no other kind of AI capability outside of it because Microsoft does provide such a large breadth of capability. But actually, we've now got tooling all over the place, and it's about the right tool for the right job.
I see the same thing, Simon, as well. Yeah, like a year ago, I was speaking to customers where they'd built aspects of agents in Azure because that's all they could do. And then as the UI for agents come about, then there was very simple agents that was just kind of retrieval, getting information as knowledge. They could not have the overheads from a development point of view and need a developer to keep monitoring and changing all of that. So if you can kind of simplify the things that you've already built, it doesn't kind of change it, right? It still needs to be there for a specific reason. But I don't think kind of you're going to be able to future-proof from a technology point of view anymore. Like I was working with a particular customer, and they wanted to know how they could do like a no-code solution for work winning and bids and tenders and RFPs, all the wonderful stuff that actually brings in money for organizations, right? And we started off talking about kind of what we could do from a no-code perspective. But then when they shared with me the actual process they went through, it was very, very complicated, right? There wasn't stuff that we could do from a no-code perspective. So then we looked at Foundry again of like, if we spin up like 10 agents that have those specific personas and skills and knowledge and tools that they need, we can achieve it. And literally, by having that conversation and then inside of Microsoft starting to see things like Copilot co-work being lit up inside of our tenant, I was like, actually, I wonder if I can take that business process they have today and build skills around it. And skills are just normal language, right? Just like instructions. But you can call specific tools and knowledge as part of those individual skills. So we went from like building 10 agents to having just one agent that can understand the process and then spin up multiple sub-agents in the background to complete the work.
Yeah,
and that's literally within like a month period. I wouldn't have been able to do that like a month prior. So
but
you're
you've
right.
learned through all of that, right? And I think that's the message, is that this technology evolution is not going to slow down. So you can't wait for the pace to slow down, because it's not going to happen. But actually, organizations starting now are going to be learning these lessons, so they're going to be naturally further ahead, right? And I think that is going to be continuous, a virtual cycle.
They are going to be further ahead, but they lack the data that actually powers this. So I spent a bit of time in an early investment vehicle here in the US, and I was actually catching up with the founder of it the other week and talking about their investment thesis. And it's really interesting that they basically have a really strict view that technology is no longer a moat, right? So 5-10 years ago, the VC and angel investment scene into early stage SaaS tools was all tech. If your tech was good, you had a defensible moat. That has now gone. Everybody has access to the same tools, the same capabilities. Like that has gone. The bit that's now your differentiator is your data. So this feels very much like we're repeating the kind of .com boom, right? Where all these .com players came about in the early 2000s, late 90s, building on infrastructure that the big retailers just weren't ready for culturally. What happened is actually over time, the big retailers got their act together and suddenly had the scale of the infrastructure, all of that stuff to make it work. And now the pure plays don't exist. And the John Lewis's, the Argos's, the Tesco's of the world, they all still do, right? Because it fits them all. I think a similar thing is going to happen. I think it's all very well and great kind of these new companies kind of existing, but if the larger organizations can actually get their act together around this stuff,
the intelligence,
they've got all of the data to supercharge the capability. Part of the benefit we've got as Tilt, rather again just fortuitously, is because we're a Howden owned business, we have all of Howden data. So we again have that best of both worlds. And I can tell you right now, if we didn't have that data, our ability to supercharge some of the stuff that we're doing with AI would be massively limited.
And I think that's a great spot to spend. And I think I've not done a great job of keeping us on track. So Hilary, I've left you 2 minutes to wrap us up. But guys, there have been some more questions in the chat we've not been able to get to. I don't know if you're able to have a little look at the chat window and add any thoughts in there for folk. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I think there's been so many great nuggets of information shared there, and this has been recorded and will be sent out so people can kind of listen back and share more broadly within their organizations as well. But yeah, thank you so much for taking an hour out of your time with us today. And I'll just pass this quickly over to Hilary to give her the 1 minute she's now got left to wrap up.
Yeah, no, all good. Thanks everyone for all the questions and excitement, and just great conversation. So didn't want to interrupt this. But yeah, I think, in terms of turning this into action to wrap, we wanted to share some elements and areas that really can support you all in creating value for AI for yourselves. So we've built our AI factory specifically to address the areas that Simon, Graham, and Jody have been discussing, activating AI in a safe and considered way and built in a way that you can trust, but also built for your organization. It allows us to support you in driving value in parallel. So, determining the areas and projects where you want to invest, creating landing zones, and just a safe place to deploy all at the same time to help you really activate at pace. And we at Transparity are really well positioned to support you with this. I mean, I think Simon's point about building versus buying and which tech stack to invest in and what's the right solution for which challenge. Because we work across all of it, we can help you navigate that. and that makes sense for kind of some next steps that we could take with you. So yeah, I mean, if this is something that you'd like to explore, clear next steps on this slide, but essentially we're really happy to work with you and just kind of consult, where are you as an organization? What are you looking to drive? And then bring that to life with solutions that are customized to you and your organization. Yeah, we'd love to work with you and just better understand how we can help. So yeah, to wrap, thanks everyone for digging into this topic with all of us. Thanks to our amazing speakers for bringing it all to life. And hopefully we've left you with some ideas on how you can leverage AI in a practical way. And we'd love to be part of that journey and help you explore the right next steps for you. But thanks everyone. I think we're sharing some of our research in the chat. So if you want to dig into that, I know Jody shared some of it. There's much more behind, what we can do with frontier development and more content and webinars to bring all of that to life coming soon. So hope everyone has amazing sunny days and long weekends ahead. Thanks again to our panelists for such great conversation. And yeah, looking forward to continue exploring this with all of you on the webinar.